These Washington quarters look ordinary, but a few from 1968, 1973, and 1978 are anything but. Collectors search relentlessly for rare versions hiding in plain sight. One tiny detail, easy to overlook, can turn everyday change into something truly valuable. Before you spend your quarters, check them carefully. Like and subscribe to uncover more hidden coin secrets. The 1968 Washington quarter is the kind of coin most people would never suspect. It's not ancient. It's not gold. It's not some legendary first-year design. It's just a regular-looking quarter that's been riding around in pockets, jars, and cash registers for decades. But here's the truth collectors learn fast. The coins that look the most normal are sometimes the ones hiding the biggest surprises. Because 1968 wasn't just another year for U.S. coinage. It was a time when the mint was still dealing with the post-silver era changes, production was high, quality control wasn't perfect, and mistakes slipped out that collectors today would pay real money to own. And yes, before we go deeper, let's set the energy level. In the world of extreme error coins, prices can reach shocking numbers. We're talking ranges like $74,500 to $189,450 when the error is massive, rare, and verified. That's not what a normal quarter is worth. That's the ceiling of the hobby when something truly insane shows up. So today we're breaking down the 1968 Washington quarter, what a normal one is worth, which errors actually matter, and how to tell the difference between a regular spender and a coin that could make a collector stop breathing for a second. First, the baseline. A normal 1968 Washington quarter is a clad coin. That means it's not silver like the older quarters from 1964 and earlier. It's a copper core sandwiched between two outer layers of copper nickel. It should have that typical silver-gray look, but if you look at the edge, you'll usually see a copper-colored stripe running through the middle. That's normal. And because millions were made, a normal circulated 1968 quarter is worth face value 25 cents. Maybe a little more if it's in unusually nice shape, but most of them are just spenders. Even uncirculated examples can bring a premium, but we're still talking normal collector money. Not crazy money. Not retire early money. The real money begins when something is wrong in a way that only the mint could create. And this is where people get confused because most errors you see online are not errors at all. They're damage. They're coins that got scraped, smashed, burned, or beaten up after leaving the mint. A real error has structure. It has a pattern. It makes sense within the minting process. So let's talk about the types of errors that can show up on a 1968 quarter, and which ones collectors actually pay for. One of the first errors to look for is an off-center strike. This happens when the blank planchet isn't seated correctly in the press. So when the die comes down, the design lands partially off the coin. You'll see a blank area where the design didn't strike at all, and the rest of the design will be pushed to one side. Off-center quarters are popular because they're dramatic and easy to understand, but the value depends on how off-center it is and whether key details are visible. The more dramatic the off-center and the more complete the date and major design elements are, the more desirable it becomes. A small off-center might sell for a modest premium. A big one with a full date and strong visual appeal can push into the hundreds. And in rare cases, especially if the coin is in great condition and the off-center is extreme, it can climb even higher. Next up, broad strikes. A broad strike happens when the quarter is struck without the collar that normally contains the metal. Instead of forming a tight rim, the coin spreads outward and becomes slightly wider than normal. The edges can look strange, the rim can be weak, and the coin can feel off in hand. Broad strikes are collectible, but they're not usually the biggest money errors unless they're very dramatic and clean. Still, they can bring strong premiums compared to a normal coin, especially when the strike is bold and the coin hasn't been damaged after the fact. Now let's talk about one of the most famous error categories in clad coins. Missing clad layer errors? Remember how a clad quarter is supposed to have outer layers? Sometimes one of those layers fails. When that happens, you can get a quarter missing its outer clad layer on one side, exposing the copper core. These are instantly recognizable if you know what to look for. The coin will look wrong in color, more coppery, more dull, and the details can appear different because the metal composition is different. A genuine missing clad layer error is a serious find. Depending on the severity, the condition, and whether it's certified, these can be worth from a few $100s to well over $1,000 in strong examples. And here's the important part. People fake these. Some coins are chemically altered or sanded down to look like a missing layer. A real missing layer will show the correct mint characteristics and weight differences, and it will often be verified by experts. Another major error type is a double strike. This happens when a coin gets struck, doesn't eject properly, and then gets struck again. The result can be a shifted second image of Washington's face, the lettering, or the eagle. Sometimes it looks like the design is sliding. Sometimes it looks like a ghost image. Double strikes are highly collectible because they look wild and they're clearly mint-made. Depending on how dramatic the second strike is and how clean the surfaces are, values can range from a couple $100s to several thousand for strong examples. Now let's talk about something collectors love: die breaks and cuds. When a die starts cracking, it can leave raised lines or blobs of extra metal on the coin. A small die crack might not be worth much, but a big cud, where a chunk of the die breaks off and leaves a raised, rounded blob at the rim, can be a strong premium error. The more dramatic and obvious it is, the more collectors want it, especially if it doesn't ruin the eye appeal of the coin. But now we enter the zone where the quarter stops being a quarter and becomes a headline. Wrong planchet errors. This is when a quarter is struck on a blank meant for another coin, or on a planchet with the wrong metal composition. These are rare, and when they happen, they create coins that shouldn't exist. A quarter struck on the wrong planchet can look smaller, lighter, or incomplete around the edges. The strike can be weird because the dies are trying to stamp a design onto a blank that isn't the right size or thickness. These are the kinds of errors that can explode in value because they're not just a mistake, they're a major manufacturing failure that slipped through. And this is where that $74,500 to $189,450 energy lives. Not in a normal 1968 quarter. Not in a lightly worn coin. But in the world of extreme wrong planchet errors, major mint mistakes, and one-of-a-kind freak accidents that collectors fight over like trophies. So let's make the difference crystal clear. A 1968 quarter without errors is usually just 25 cents in circulated condition. In uncirculated condition, it can be worth more, but still normal collector money. A 1968 quarter with minor errors, small off-centers, light die cracks, can be worth a nice premium, maybe tens or hundreds depending on how dramatic it is. A 1968 quarter with major errors, missing clad layer, dramatic double strike, major cud, or wrong planchet, is where the serious money starts. So here's the strategy if you want to hunt these like a pro. First, look at the edge. That copper stripe is normal. But if the coin's color looks wrong overall, pay attention. Second, check the strike. If it looks shifted, doubled, or off-center, don't ignore it. Third, weigh suspicious coins if you can. A wrong planchet error often has a different weight. Fourth, don't clean anything. Cleaning kills value fast, especially on error coins where surface originality matters. And finally, if you find something that looks truly insane, don't guess, verify. The biggest money in errors comes from confidence and authentication, because the 1968 Washington quarter is the kind of coin people spend without thinking. But the right one, the one that left the mint with a mistake, is the kind of coin that turns a normal day into a treasure story. So check your change, check old rolls, check inherited jars, and don't sleep on the boring years. Sometimes the treasure is hiding in the most ordinary quarter you've ever seen. Until next time, happy treasure hunting. The 1973 Washington quarter is the kind of coin you've probably spent without thinking twice. It's not ancient. It's not gold. It doesn't scream rare when you see it in your change. It just looks like a regular quarter from the era when America was still running on payphones, muscle cars, and pocket change. But here's what collectors know that most people don't. The most dangerous coins are the ones that look normal. Because when a coin looks normal, nobody saves it. Nobody protects it. Nobody checks it. And that's exactly how real mint errors survive, quietly slipping through the system and hiding in plain sight for decades. Today we're diving into the 1973 U.S. Washington quarter error coin world, the kind of mistakes that can turn a 25-cent piece into something collectors will pay real money for. And yes, in the world of extreme mint errors, there are coins that can bring insane results. Numbers like $65,300 all the way up to $167,340 when the error is dramatic, rare, and verified. That doesn't mean your 1973 quarter is automatically worth that. It means the ceiling is high when the mistake is big enough. So let's start with the baseline, because if you don't understand what a normal 1973 quarter is, you'll fall for hype fast. A standard 1973 Washington quarter is a clad coin, meaning it's a copper core sandwiched between outer layers of nickel. It should weigh about 5.67 grams, and in normal circulated condition, it's worth face value. 25 cents. That's it. Even though it's older than a lot of people watching this video, it's still common. But collectors don't stop at common. Collectors ask a different question: what went wrong? Because the moment something goes wrong at the mint, a common coin can become uncommon instantly. The first error type you need to know is the off-center strike. This is one of the most visual errors in the hobby, and it's exactly what it sounds like. The blank wasn't seated correctly, so when the die came down, the design landed off to the side. You'll see part of Washington's head missing, part of the rim blank, and the whole coin looks like it's sliding out of frame. Now, not every off-center quarter is worth a fortune, but here's the key. The more dramatic the off-center, and the more complete the date and mint mark are, the more valuable it becomes. A small off-center might bring $20 to $50. A bigger one with a clear date can jump into the hundreds. And if it's a major off-center with strong eye appeal and it's authenticated, that's where collectors start bidding like it's a trophy. Next up is the broad strike. A broad strike happens when the coin is struck without the collar that normally contains it. That means the quarter expands outward more than it should. It often looks wider, flatter, and the rim may look weak or strangely shaped. Broad strikes are popular because they're clean, obvious, and they scream mint mistake. Without needing a microscope, a broad strike quarter from 1973 can sell for a solid premium, especially if it's uncirculated and the strike is dramatic. It's not usually a five-figure error, but it's a real collectible that can still bring strong money. Now let's talk about something that sounds minor, but gets serious fast. Clipped planchets. A clipped planchet is when the metal blank was cut incorrectly before striking, leaving a curved chunk missing from the edge. It looks like someone took a bite out of the coin. The important thing is the clip should look natural and smooth, not jagged like damage. Real clips often show subtle weakness opposite the clip because the blank didn't sit perfectly in the press. A small clip might be $20 to $60. A bigger clip with clean surfaces can go much higher, especially if the coin is in nice condition and the clip is dramatic. Now we get into the category where collectors really pay attention. Double strikes. A double strike happens when the coin gets struck, doesn't eject properly, and then gets struck again. Sometimes the second strike is rotated. Sometimes it's offset. Sometimes it creates a ghost-like second image that looks almost unreal. These can be extremely valuable because they're visual and unique. A mild double strike might bring a couple hundred. A dramatic rotated double strike can bring much more. This is the kind of error that makes people stop scrolling and say, "Wait, what am I looking at?" Then there's the strike-through error. This is when something gets between the die and the coin during the strike. Could be grease, debris, a piece of cloth, or some kind of foreign material. The result is missing details, weird textures, or parts of the design that look like they melted away. Some strike-through errors are small and only worth a little. But the big dramatic ones, where entire areas are missing or distorted, those are the ones collectors chase. The value depends on how clear and unusual the strike-through is. Now let's talk about the real heavy hitters for quarters. Wrong planchet errors. This is where a quarter stops being a quarter. A wrong planchet error means the quarter design was struck on a blank meant for another coin. Maybe it was supposed to be a smaller denomination. Maybe it was supposed to be a completely different composition. When that happens, the quarter might look too small, too light, or the design might not fit correctly on the blank. This is the kind of error that turns a normal coin into a headline coin. Because wrong planchet errors are not common. They're not supposed to escape. And when they do, collectors treat them like modern miracles. This is also where the biggest numbers in the error world come from. That $65,300 to $167,340 range? That's the kind of money people associate with extreme, rare, verified mint errors, especially when the coin is dramatic, unique, and in high-grade condition. Not every wrong planchet error hits that level, but this is the category where the ceiling gets crazy. Now, one of the most misunderstood categories in quarters is the missing clad layer or split planchet type of error. A clad quarter is made of layers. If one layer is missing or improperly bonded, the coin can look wrong in color and weight. It might look coppery, or it might look unusually pale. These errors can be valuable, but they're also heavily faked or confused with environmental damage. So, if you see a 1973 quarter that looks coppery, don't assume you hit the jackpot. The best move is to weigh it and compare it to a normal quarter. A true missing layer error often has a noticeable weight difference. Now let's make the difference crystal clear. A normal 1973 quarter, circulated, is worth 25 cents. A normal 1973 quarter in high grade can be worth more, but it's still not an insane money coin unless it's in exceptional condition. A 1973 quarter with a real mint error is where the game changes. Off-center strikes, broad strikes, clipped planchets, double strikes, strike-throughs, missing layers, and especially wrong planchet errors can push values from tens of dollars to hundreds, sometimes thousands, depending on how dramatic the error is. And the extreme end of the hobby, the legendary, verified, once-in-a-lifetime pieces, that's where people start throwing around numbers like $65,300 to $167,340. So here's the hunting strategy if you want to search like a pro. First, check the date and mint mark. Then look at the strike quality. Does the coin look centered? Does the rim look normal? Are there missing details? Does anything look doubled or shifted? Second, weigh anything suspicious. A digital scale is your best friend. Third, don't clean the coin. Cleaning kills value. And finally, if you think you found something big, compare it to real verified examples and consider authentication. Because the difference between a $30 curiosity and a $3,000 error coin is proof. The 1973 Washington quarter is one of those coins that hides in plain sight. Most are just spenders. But the right one, with the right mistake, can turn a regular quarter into a real collector prize. So check your change, check your old jars, and don't ignore the coins that look too common to matter. Sometimes the common ones are exactly where the treasure is hiding. Until next time, happy treasure hunting. The 1978 Washington quarter is one of those coins that feels completely ordinary. It's the kind of quarter you've probably spent without thinking, tossed into vending machines, dropped into tip jars, or left in a cup holder for months. No big redesign, no special anniversary, no reason for the average person to ever look twice. But collectors know something most people don't. The most valuable coins aren't always the oldest ones, and they aren't always the ones made of silver. Sometimes the real treasure is hiding in a modern-looking coin that slipped through the system with a mistake so obvious once you see it, you'll never look at your change the same way again. And in the world of major US mint errors, prices can reach insane levels. We're talking ranges like $62,450 to $154,220 when the error is extreme, rare, and verified. Not because it's a normal 1978 quarter, but because it's the kind of coin that shouldn't exist. So today we're breaking down the 1978 Washington quarter error coins that actually matter, how to spot them, and the difference between a regular quarter worth face value and an error quarter that collectors will fight over. Let's start with the baseline, because this is where most people get tricked online. A normal 1978 Washington quarter is a clad coin. That means it's not silver. It's made of layers with a copper core and nickel outer layers. In circulation, most 1978 quarters are worth exactly 25 cents. Even if you find one in decent shape, it's still usually just a spender. Now, condition can change things slightly. If you find a truly uncirculated 1978 quarter with clean surfaces, sharp details, and no major marks, it might be worth a small premium to someone building a high-grade set. But we're still not talking crazy money. The crazy money starts when the coin has a real mint error. And a real mint error is not the same thing as damage. A quarter that got smashed in a dryer, scraped on concrete, or hit by a tool is not an error coin. That's just a quarter that had a rough life. A real error happens during production, and it has a specific look that follows a pattern. So what are the 1978 quarter errors worth watching for? The first one is the easiest to spot and one of the most popular. The off-center strike. An off-center quarter happens when the blank isn't seated properly in the press. When the dies come down, the design lands partially off the coin. You'll see a blank crescent area with no design at all. These are exciting because they look dramatic even to non-collectors. But value depends on two things: how far off-center it is, and whether the date is still visible. A small off-center might be worth $20 or $40. A bigger one with a full date and a clean strike can jump into the hundreds. The more dramatic and attractive it is, the more collectors want it. Next up is the broad strike. This happens when the quarter is struck outside the collar that normally keeps it perfectly round and contained. Without that collar, the metal spreads outward, and the coin comes out wider than normal with an odd-looking rim. Broad strikes are real mint errors, and collectors love them because they're easy to recognize and hard to fake convincingly. Depending on how strong the broad strike is and how clean the coin looks, these can sell from $30 up to a couple $100. Now we move into one of the most misunderstood errors: The clipped planchet. A clipped planchet means the blank was cut wrong before it was struck, leaving a curved chunk missing from the edge. It often looks like someone took a bite out of the coin. But here's the difference. A real clip is smooth and curved, not jagged and broken on quarters. Clipped planchets can be surprisingly collectible. Smaller clips might bring $15 to $50. Larger clips, especially on a nice coin, can reach $100 or more. Now let's talk about something that gets collectors excited because it looks like the coin is broken in a strange, raised way. Die cracks and cuts. A die crack happens when the die starts splitting from stress. That crack transfers onto the coin as a raised line. A cut is more extreme, when a chunk of the die breaks away and leaves a raised blob of metal on the coin, often near the rim. Small die cracks can be common and only worth a small premium. But big cracks and strong cuts are different. They're dramatic, they're visible, and collectors pay for that. A bold cut on a 1978 quarter can easily move into the $100 to $300 range depending on size and eye appeal. Now we get into the category that separates casual collectors from serious hunters. Double strikes and multiple strikes. A double strike happens when the coin gets struck, then doesn't eject properly and gets hit again. The result can be a shifted second strike, overlapping designs, and a coin that looks like it came out of a mint nightmare. These can be worth hundreds to even thousands depending on how clear the second strike is. A strong double strike is the kind of error you don't need a microscope for. You see it and you instantly know it's special. And now we're entering the heavy hitter territory. Wrong planchet errors. This is the type of error that can turn a quarter into a legend. A wrong planchet quarter means the Washington quarter design was struck on a blank meant for a different coin. The wrong size, the wrong metal, the wrong weight, something that absolutely should not have happened. These are rare, and when they're real and verified, they can become some of the most valuable modern errors in the hobby. This is the category where you start hearing numbers like $62,450 to $154, $220. That price range isn't for a normal quarter. It's not even for a basic off-center. That's the kind of money collectors pay for the extreme stuff. The kind of coin that becomes famous in error coin circles. The kind of coin that makes people say, I didn't even know that could exist. So how do you protect yourself and hunt smart? Here's the simple 1978 quarter strategy. First, check your change for anything that looks obviously wrong. Off-center strikes, clips, broad strikes, big cuts, coins that look like they were struck twice. Second, look at the edge. A normal clad quarter has a copper-colored stripe visible on the edge because of the copper core. If you see something strange, like the edge looks wrong, too thick, too thin, or the wrong color, slow down and investigate. Third, don't clean the coin. Not even a little. Cleaning kills collector value fast, especially on error coins where surfaces matter. Fourth, if the coin is extremely weird, compare it to known error types and consider professional authentication. Because the difference between a $50 curiosity and a $5,000 monster is certainty. And the difference between a fake and a real wrong planchet strike is expert verification. Most 1978 quarters are worth face value. But the right 1978 quarter with the right mistake can turn a simple pocket coin into something collectors will chase for years. So check your change. Look closer. And don't ignore the boring years. Because sometimes the boring years are exactly where the treasure is hiding. Drop a comment if you found any strange quarters lately. Off-center, clipped, doubled, or anything that looks like it came out of the mint wrong. And until next time, happy treasure hunting.